with those guys as a volunteer. Of course, Mike Marion retired just before he went on a career department, but I worked with him as a volunteer. An aide I worked with many years. Now, 1964, in September, the Bowlaroo Bowling Alleys on Black Rock Turnpike opposite Brookside Drive had a slight fire there. You were at that one, I'm sure.
Yeah, that was one that was really going the full length of the alleys. They were just refinishing the alleys. And remember Louis Stopa, driving engine 2, took the hydrant right across the street on Brookside Drive and Black Rock Turnpike, and there was a heck of an explosion, and he and the truck both got hit with flying glass. The big windows blew out.
They had to be 80, 100 feet away.
Yeah. Well, at the width of the Black Rock Turnpike plus the setback from the Black Rock Turnpike to the building. It was totaled. The ironwork expanded, pushed out the block walls, and everything came tumbling down. And there was a case where they thought the owner had set the place on fire. And because of the physical evidence, when the amount of fire when they first pulled up and the spread of it, and but actually what it was purely accidental. They were refinishing the alleys, they kept blowing fuses, so they put a larger fuse in. And unknown to them, when they quit for the day, there was already a fire in the basement.
Oh. Now, that was a pretty big place. I don't remember exactly. They had about 20 alleys there, I bet, right?
And that was the other problem. It was such a wide open space. And I think, like you said, it probably had 20 alleys in it. It was making out when there was no financial problems, and that's what they're trying in the investigation. Probably arson, but why would the owner said it? He's making money.
Yeah. Now, they didn't burn, but Fairfield had a number of bowling alleys. The Bowlaroo, which they never rebuilt, that's a gas station now. Kingsway alleys eventually became Fredericksburg Restaurant, which now is Staples Plaza, right?
Yeah.
Black Rock Turnpike and Kings Highway. The other two bowling alleys, that one is completely gone and the other hasn't been used in at least 30 years, behind the Open Bookstore on Umpqua Road, where Swat Son has his shop, right? But you must remember when they were open.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. There was some alleys in there.
There was alleys in there, and then in back of the Fairfield Center Jewelers, the
Redmond's Hall.
Redmond's Hall, on the first floor was a bowling alley.
And I responded to an oil burner fire there with you as a volunteer. So about a good 30 years ago, we went there. It wasn't much of a fire, but they had the big hall upstairs, which eventually became the Elks Club. And they must have had 10, I guess, bowling alleys at Redmond's Hall. Now, I know that the jewelry store, they made offices back there only about 10 years ago. But behind the Open Bookstore, Swat's, his alleys are still there.
Part of his shop is in there.
And there's that house in there that Harry Loveland used to live in.
Yeah.
That house on Somme Court. How about Heritage Square, 1966? That was another cold one. That was in February. You were the lieutenant on Engine 1. I was a volunteer riding on the number 4 position on the 1957 aerial ladder. And that call came in about 20 after 6 in the morning. Bob Janko, the cop, reported it. Had the fire in the organ business, right in the corner there.
Yeah, at that time we had your driver on the engine and your lieutenant, and you had 2 men on the aerial. And Herbie Schumann happened to be my driver that day. And he hooked into the hydrant right in front of the place. So who's left to pull the hose? The lieutenant. Things worked out real well. It wasn't soon after that they transferred the lieutenant to the aerials because of that problem. You lay the line in to a fire scene. Where's the lieutenant? Instead of being up at the fire to evaluate things, he was back at the hydrant.
So that was one of the reasons the lieutenant once went on the ladder truck.
Yeah.
I remember that. I didn't really know why.
That was to eliminate that problem of the lieutenant being back at the hydrant. Who's
Well-
supposed to be kind of a supervisor.
We thought we had that fire out at
There
Heritage
was
Square,
a
didn't we?
time that we thought that we had the fire knocked down. The old theory of black smoke turning to light gray doesn't really hold true.
It did that
We
one.
had the light gray smoke, and then all of a sudden we had a heck of a rip-roaring fire going. One of the problems there was new construction over old construction. The south end of the peaked roof was wide open and drew the fire right down through that. And the fact that
It was the old lumber yard, I guess, right?
It was the old lumber yard, the old box factory, and the flooring and the ceiling was all 2.5 by 6 tongue and groove. You could see the fire above you because the place was not finished. You looked along the edge of the side walls and you could see the fire above you, but you couldn't get to it. And at one point there was quite a scare when the roof collapsed. We thought we had some guys up on the roof. Fortunately, they went down the backside where Aerial 2 was working and Aerial 3 from Bridgeport. And we had Engine 3 from Bridgeport, and Engine 7 from Bridgeport, and he was hooked up to the hydrant on the corner of Miller Street and Post Way, where Larry's Diner used to be. And Larry's Diner was open to all the firemen all day long. Anything you needed, anything you wanted,
Charlie Kadar.
Charlie Kadar donated. And I went down to get a cup of coffee and talked to the pump operator. He says, 15 years on the job, and this is the first time I had to wear a helmet because of the clunkers coming down.
That far away.
Yeah.
Now, didn't Aerial 2, which was that old La France, the early 40s, they had to drive that off of the jacks to get away from the building?
Yeah. The fire had broken out through the back like a blowtorch, and Mike Krenek hollered up to somebody that was on a turntable to put the aerial over the truck. Got to drive it off. So they pivoted the aerial around over the top of the truck, and Mike drove it off the jacks.
Still elevated.
Still
up.
elevated.
And I remember the coats on the
coats
side of the
on
truck,
the side,
they all caught fire.
the rotating red beacon on the roof of the truck melted down. They're fortunate that's all that happened to it. Could have lost it.
Now, that was an L-shaped building. If anybody knows what Heritage Square looks like right now, looking at it on the left-hand side, you had the portion that came out to the post road. That was the hardware store for Fairfield Lumber.
Yep.
And it went straight down to the corner where the fire started, and then it went along Carter Henry Drive. And the fire started right in the corner, went along Carter Henry Drive, then it started to travel toward the post road.
Right.
And remember, didn't we have a scare when we were raising a 35-foot extension ladder and we almost hit all those electrical lines?
Yeah, getting this 35-foot ladder up in the front, and about 15 feet from the building were all the high tension lines. Didn't have a problem getting the ladder up. It was later on trying to get it down when it froze, and we had to take it down and walk it down on the beam parallel with the overhead power lines, and that was kind of scary. The ladder was frozen and couldn't get it down by normal means, so
That would have wiped everybody out had you gone near
anybody
those.
touching that ladder would have been wiped out.
That was a pretty tough one. We had a couple of beach cottage fires too, 3 in a clip. Used to go down. I remember Captain Murphy, who was my first captain on a job. He'd leave headquarters in car 2, and Fairfield Beach Road for years, the numbering was all followed up. And nobody knew what numbers were anywhere. They had box numbers and they had street numbers. So we would always ask if it was to the left or right. And one time Murphy got on the air and said, "You don't have to worry about it. You're going to see it." And he was right. You turn that corner on the Post Road onto Reef Road, and you'd see the glow, or sometimes you'd even see the flames. But you must have been in on a couple of those.
Yeah, a few of them. That one particular one that Murph had really took it totaled 2 of them and destroyed probably about half of the third one. And that's just right across from the training grounds on Fairfield Beach Road.
And these were about, just before I came on, I was a volunteer, so we're talking between 64 and 67 when we had, like you said, 2 or 3 at a clip.
And Murphy always seemed to get the workers. We had another one over on Fairfield Beach Road. Between Roland Road and Reef.
Lowell Barker's house. I was an engine 4 for that. Captain Ruat smashed the fence to the property going in.
The thing was going, had a good hold, the fire had a good hold of the attic and the roof. Did a nice, fine job knocking it down and keeping it from getting to the cottage next door. And I remember the Johnson brothers were volunteers out of Tewes. Their father was Carl Johnson, who was the pavement up at Tewes. And it's getting near 5:30 in the morning, and they're over. I've got the crew up there overhauling, and I said, hold it, did you hear that? And they froze, and they're listening. Well, hear what? The crack of dawn.
That's right, I remember you did that to me too. Yep, we're gonna stay here till we hear the crack.
If they could have got a hold of me, I think I would have landed in the sand from the 3rd floor.
Yep, I was with you guys on the end of Morehouse Lane one time when you pulled out on us, waiting for the crack of dawn. How about police garage, the old police garage? They had a small fire there one morning. I think you and Charlie Osberg were on for that. Charlie was the dispatcher.
Yeah, Charlie was the dispatcher, and we mentioned earlier about that. We hit the floor immediately, didn't know where we were going, and the police officer on the desk called over, said, "We got a garage fire." Charlie naturally asked, "Where?" And the officer got very disturbed about it. He says, "What do you mean, where?" And hung up. No, we still don't know where it is. All of a sudden, between the Venetian blinds, we could see this thing blazing over there. When it exploded, it took one of the overhead, there must have been about 8, 9 overhead doors in it.
Yeah, a whole bunch.
It took the door the door frame and all the trim all in one piece and blew it out across the driveway probably 70 feet. And the only thing that was busted on the door was the glass.
Okay.
One section right out across. That fire started when we got an ambulance call, and it was supposedly up in Greenfield Hill area somewhere, and the cop checked the gas. He says, well, that's a pretty long ways up and back and forth to the hospital. He gassed up.
Bob Russo was the cop.
And they had some problems with vandalism. Car tires were being slashed, and gas pump, the hose line was slashed. So they moved the pump was inside the garage, and they used to hang the hose up outside. Well, they changed it around, they put it on the inside, and there was a lever on the outside where to activate the pump. Well, he took the hose line and the nozzle and laid it up on top of the pump. Never shut the pump off. And shut the garage door and took off for the ambulance call. Well, down the middle of the floor from one end to the other end of the garage was a water trough. Vibration of the pump running, nozzle fell off the top, hit the floor and sprang open. And was pumping gas down through this trough when the heater in the ambulance bay decided, well, it's getting cold in here, we better get some heat on. And when it fired off, that was the disaster in the garage.
Wow, yeah, I remember that one. We talked briefly about Joe Stopa. Now, he became the first chief about, what, 1957, I believe?
About 1957.
So you had the 5 volunteer chiefs.
They had the 5 volunteer chiefs who were now under Joe Stopa. There was, because of the change, there was some resentment, but on the whole, it worked out pretty well. He got good cooperation from him.
He was a gentleman, wasn't he?
He sure was. There was a very weird chain of command at that time, and because of the way the fire commission was set up, the chain of command was the paid chief, the volunteer chief, paid lieutenant. The paid lieutenant had to take orders from the volunteer chief.
Wow.
After a struggle, that was changed, and then you had a little more resentment. And the problem behind it all, it could have been settled very easy and very nicely. The Board of Fire Commissioners at that time were nominated. There was 5 commissioners. They were nominated by each individual company, one commissioner representing one company. So you had 5 commissioners, and they were in office for 1 year. And then when their time was up, it wasn't a staggering position. At the end of whatever, July, that's when that board ended.
So you had a whole new, you could have a whole new commission.
You could have a whole new commission the next day.
Great for continuity.
Yeah. Their name would be submitted to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen would appoint or not. If they weren't appointed, the name would go back to the company that they were supposedly representing. The company would merely turn around and send it back to the Board of Selectmen, and that's the way it worked. You had, for many, many years, the same commissioners. And what hurt the paid department was when it came time for a pay raise. When we first went on, our yearly salary was $28.50 a year. Now, out of that $28.50, pension would come out, and income tax. So, you compare the salaries today and those days, there's a little bit of a nice raise in there. But anyways, you go for a pay raise, you had to go to the Board of Fire Commissioners. Now, probably 4 out of that 5-member commission, you were already making more money than they were. Now, how do you ask a guy that's making less money than you are for a pay raise?
So things haven't changed too much there.
Things haven't changed too much there. In fact, one year, the first selectman said there will be no pay raises across the board this year. Well, every department put in for a pay raise for their men, 6-7%. And our budget hearing is in process and it's winding down to get near the end. And we're all kind of looking at it, what happened to our representation here? They're going to ask for a raise. And just before it ended, the meeting closed, the chairman of the commission says, and by the way, if you're going to give other departments a pay raise, we would like you to consider our men. We got a very nice pay raise that year.
Good.
$52.
Hey.
$52. And out of that $52, I took out pension and income tax. So you wound up with probably 80 cents a week.
That was, those are tough days though, but, and you were working, like you said earlier, you were starting at 72 hours a week.
56 hours, and then through state legislation, they dropped it down to 40 hours. But it was it was a step down. It wasn't from one day to the next. You went from 56 to I think it was 48, and then down to 42. But you worked with groups. They didn't have.
You worked with
shifts.
different guys.
One day, Group A and B might be working. The second day, Group A and B might be working. The third day, B and C might be working. Oh, talk about confusion. It's a wonder that it worked out well. It's a wonder that the guys that were supposed to show up for work did.
Wow. How about, you talked about the first selectman before. When you came on, Dim Mulcahy, was he the first selectman?
Here's the, yes. He really was kind of a quiet guy. Wasn't much around the fire stations or anything. Although when they were building the new headquarters on Reef Road, which is Engine 1 now, he wanted to have a guy arrested because the guy picked up a bucket of, a little wash pail full of aluminum. Wanted to have him arrested.
Tough guy.
He also wanted to have 2 other guys arrested. Working with Chet, you didn't know what was going to happen when you went to an alarm. Which way was he going to go? but he squealed the tires going around the corner. Sometimes. Well, we got a call for brush fire on Melville Avenue from the center. 2s and 3s are out. And to this day, I don't know why he did it. He probably didn't know the day that he did it, why he did it. At the traffic circle, cut to the left.
Instead of going all the way.
Instead of going to the right, around the circle, cut to the left, and who's standing in the, where McDonald's is now, was the old Roadside Inn, which was Kenny's
Which also
second
burnt.
Hmm?
Which also burnt. the
Which
roadside
also
inn.
burned.
Yeah.
Second office, Demo Kenny standing in the doorway. We got back, and he wanted to have us arrested. I said, what do you want to have me arrested for? I wasn't driving, he was driving. Again, Tom Carroll, being the man that he was, he backed us 100%. I don't know why, but we're dead wrong.
That's always a help.
The only thing that counts was the outcome.
Well, Stopa became the first chief. He went from firefighter to chief, right? He came out
Right.
of the Stratfield
Right.
section of the fire department. Now that chief's test, that was open to anybody who wanted to take it.
Yeah. Any
Civilians?
Anybody, civilians, anybody wanted.
Okay, and Stopa came out first.
Came out first.
So he became the chief in '57. I believe it was
I think it
'57.
was 57.
Because the first chief's car was a '57 Ford station wagon with a great big Federal Model Q siren mounted on the right front fender.
Yeah.
And the letters chief had to be about 8 inches
inches
high on the
high.
car. Remember all that gold leaf? Well, it was shortly thereafter that you and the chief got together and acquired the Nike site for training.
Yeah. The Nike site was reverted back to the town, and it was left up to the town what they wanted to do with the buildings.
Well, one of the things I do have to mention here, because some of our younger firefighters, when they talk about a Nike site, they think they made sneakers here. It was a missile
This was a missile,
launching situation, right?
right, launching storage facility.
Now this was the barracks.
This area where the fire school is, the fire school building was administration and recreation, and the jail and barber shop.
The jail, appropriate.
And the other buildings were dormitories, cafeteria, and this was the launch site. The metal towers that are out there, two were trackers, and one was a radar unit. And the small building where the large propane tank is, that was launch control. They had two trailers backed in against the building that had all the controls for launching and guiding the missiles.
And we had the old smokehouse.
The old smokehouse, which was a one-room building about 26 by 26, was a generating plant. This area controlled the launch site on Old Dam Road, where the actual missiles were stored. And
So the silos, which I think they're starting to fill in now.
they're supposed to be
30 years later, they're starting to fill in the silos now.
And when they reverted back to the town, Stope was talking to Sullivan, and he got back to me when he came down and looked at the area over. Of course, everything was vacant probably 5 years.
This was a baseball diamond right out here.
This was the baseball diamond there, and also the helicopter pad,
And a tennis court
tennis
over
courts.
there.
And this was between Chief Stope and myself. I liked this area because of the building and the towers and the two buildings that were out in the back there, which was one the generating plant and the control building. And highway department wanted it, and parks department wanted it. You got all these other buildings around us; they were still vacant. And somehow, John Sullivan leaned with us, and we got what you see here today.
Sully liked the firefighters, though, didn't he?
He was
a volunteer.
He was a volunteer for many, many years, and just about anything the fire service wanted or needed, he backed. He took a lot of criticism for it, but it worked out.
Did he actually, in his early days, fight fire with you guys? Did he have gear?
No. Yeah, before he became first selectman. Oh, yeah.
So, because he owned the flower shop.
The flower shop, sure.
Which is next to where the post office is now. That was Sullivan's flower shop. So before he was first selectman.
Then, his first flower shop was across from, what the heck is the name of the, Sam Goody's.
Okay, where Kilborn and Sowers around.
Across the street there, right next to where John Sullivan's Tavern used to be.
Okay.
That's where his flower shop was. Then he moved down.
Like by Fellner's gas station?
Yeah, across the street. Yeah.
All right.
But he'd be there. Then when he came first selectman, he'd still be there, but just as an observer. And no matter what time of the day or night or morning it was, his wife Bess was with him. She'd get up in the middle of the night to go to a fire.
John Sullivan and Adrian had a very close bond.
Oh, yeah.
Because I remember saying to Adrian, "Ad, how long have you known Sully?" And he'd look at me and he'd go, "Since the day he came to town." Yeah, they were close. They were close. Well, so the fire school. So John Sullivan sided with you and Chief Stopa, and they gave you this building and the surrounding grounds.
Yeah, the upkeep of it was all volunteer. When we need some paint, that came out of the fire department budget. And as you well know, you were part of the group that was down here nights painting and shaping things up. And we had quite a few times to make a midnight requisition building across the parking lot.
Yes.
There was a door missing, there was doorknobs missing, there was toilets missing.
I can remember, yeah.
And
you're ruining my career right now with these stories. I hope you know that.
I was thinking of a story, but I better bypass that one.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I remember Adrian did a lot of plumbing down here, and you had a bunch of us. We all wanted to be part of it because it was something new and it was something good for the fire department. But what really helped establish the school was when it became a regional school.
Yes. When we first came down here and started operating, training, if you want to call it, we had a 3,000-gallon oil tank that I had Public Works cut in half for us, laying out in back, and the grass was about 3 feet tall, and we'd fill them 3/4 of the way with water and then fuel oil and light it off, and that was our pit fires. I was, at the time, a member of the Connecticut Fire Department Instructors Association, and Andy Flanagan heard about the area that we had, and he came down.
Andy was head of training for the state?
He was he was the spokesman for the Connecticut Firemen's Association,
Okay.
and also a lobbyist for